Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Lots of hellos, so that's great. Got quite a decent group of people today, so that's awesome. Yes, good afternoon. Good morning to those who are in BC, though, because we've just hit noon here in Alberta. All right, so since it is, well, it's now 12:01, so we're going to get started in the housekeeping portion. We might still have some people that join us, so we'll let them join us if they'd like. Okay, so welcome to today's session. So before we get started, remember that if you've been on a session with me before, there are things I have to say. So the presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. Any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. Some of the topics presented in this webinar may be of a sensitive nature and not appropriate for children, so we do ask for parental discretion. Today is not really anything sensitive, but we're going to be talking about shift work with adults, not with children, so just kind of keep that in mind. Please understand that people's stories are theirs alone to tell, and that anything that I share by participants in this webinar, either on camera or in the chat, is not to be discussed outside of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on cafconnection.ca. Though active participation is encouraged, you may simply follow along without using the chat or the video microphone functions if you would prefer. So if you haven't seen a session with me before, I don't turn on the video or mic functions for participants until the very end, and only then if somebody has requested it so that they can ask a question verbally versus typing out a whole question in the chat. I find that when you turn on too many mics, inevitably people forget to turn off their mic, and so you can hear everything going on in their lives at the same time as a presentation, right? So that's not exactly ideal. There is, of course, the chat box on the side there. I really encourage you to participate in that. I think you get more out of it when you're engaging with others, as well as you learn more from the participants and not just me talking, right? I will be doing a couple polls throughout. Just keep in mind, these are anonymous. I can't see who answered what, and neither can anybody else that sees the recording at the end. So don't worry about anything that you potentially put in there. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned today, we are talking about shift work and sleep. So it is one of the last sessions of our Sleep and You series. We have one more after this. So if you are a shift worker or you live with a shift worker, then this is definitely the session for you. If that doesn't describe you, then that's okay. You still might get something out of this, which is fantastic. So I'm going to ask a quick little poll question before we get started, and that is, what is your affiliation with the CAF community? So are you a serving member, a veteran, a family member, a civilian employee, or other? Okay, so majority of people have answered. We're still waiting for a few, but they can answer when they get a chance. Maybe they ran away to get some tea or something. So majority is a serving member, so that's fantastic. Welcome. We've got a veteran, a family member. We've got a couple civilian employees and a few others. I also would like to acknowledge that we may have some veterans who are also civilian employees, but they may have chosen to select civilian employee because that's what best describes them at this time. Okay. So in the chat, I know a couple of people have already said hi from wherever they're from, but if you want to let me know in the chat where you're joining from, and then we can kind of see where we're kind of all placed around the country and outside of the country. National Capital Region, okay. Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver, Prince Albert, Edmonton, Halifax, Edmonton. Oh, we got Edmonton's really representing today. Montreal, Richmond, BC, Central Ontario, Sudbury, Eskimo, Trenton. I can never say that right, by the way. Trenton, Whitby. Awesome. So many places today, which is fantastic. If you haven't seen a session with me before, my name is Lisa Fisher, and I'm the health promotion specialist here at Four Wing Cold Lake. So that's where I'm joining you from, is my spare bedroom in Cold Lake, which today is overcast and cold and rainy. Hence why I'm wearing a very fluffy cardigan right now, because it's a little chilly and the light is on, because otherwise I would be in darkness. Okay, so let's move on to the actual content, because you're probably interested in that. I'm going to ask quickly, though, who's a shift worker here? And I'm going to do a poll that way. So I'm sharing a poll right now that says, are you a shift worker? So answer yes, I'm currently a shift worker. No, I am not a shift worker. I used to be a shift worker, or I'm preparing to start working shifts. So that might be, you might be changing the unit that you're in. You may be posted to another unit, or might be changing trades, or you might be posted to a whole other base that you'll be working shifts. Okay, so interesting. We have quite a few people that have answered that they either used to be a shift worker or they're not a shift worker right now. So that's definitely interesting to come and hang out in this session. Maybe you just like listening to me every day. And then we have somebody that's a current shift worker, which is great, and a few people that are preparing to start shifts. Great. Even for those who, they aren't currently a shift worker, or they used to work shifts, you may need to work shifts in the future, potentially. So this is still really good information for you. All right, let's move on here. So what does shift work look like? There's a lot of different variety in shift work, but essentially it's scheduled work that's outside of normal hours. Now, when you ask somebody what normal hours are, that also varies. So it can the definition can change depending on what resource you're really looking at. So when you look at different references, that definition does change. And we have to think that in a military environment, that also has an impact on what normal working hours are. So some people have defined a normal work day as anything between 900 to 1700 hours, where others say between 700 to 1800 hours. I would say in the military way of things, is probably a normal workday, generally, at least with people I speak to here, is anything between 700 to 1800 hours. A lot of the people that work the day shift, or they work straight days here, they start between 7 to 8, and I've seen that with a lot of other bases as well. So kind of anything outside of that 700 to 1800 hours is what we would call a shift, probably likely in the military world. So there's different options that you could see. You could see an early morning shift, which would be somebody going to work in the early morning hours. For example, somebody who starts at like 4 or 5 in the morning. An example of these types of people might be drivers, right? I know for here we have the IBBS, so it's a shuttle that goes from Cold Lake to Edmonton, and it leaves at 6 in the morning. So your driver is getting up quite early to be able to leave for 6 in the morning. Evening shifts would see anybody that's going to work 1500 hours or later. So yes, they're starting in that normal work hour period, but they're staying at work later than 1800 hours, right? An overnight shift would see somebody that's working, after 2300 hours. That's when they start work, and they end before 1100 hours the next day. So a 12-hour shift, maybe 8-hour shift, depending on whatever works. Rotating shift schedules are those where people rotate between day, evening, and or night shifts. There are so many variations in rotational shift schedules that can be used. And they do these to ensure that there's 24-hour coverage in certain trades. So for example, first responders, so MPs would have a rotational shift schedule, or your firefighters would have a rotational shift schedule to make sure that somebody's always available. Split shifts, so when people complete 2 scheduled periods of work each day. I know, for example, like when I used to work in retail or the restaurant industry, I often had to work split shifts. So I would do, one scheduled shift of like 4 or 5 hours, and then I'd go home for a few hours and I'd come back. I did love them. So some people might, I didn't. Being on call, of course, definitely some military people will be on call. It means that you may be at home, but you could be called into work at any point. Irregular schedules, that's when you don't have a set shift schedule, but it changes due to the demands of the job. And we might see that often with military. What's going on with the operation or the operational requirements. So maybe you do have a set shift schedule, but that might change because something has happened and you need to, change who's coming in, when they're coming in to make sure that you're meeting those demands. And then 24 on, 24 off. So we do have, some trades for specific missions may be doing this. We have some military members that do this here. However, on that 24 on, 24 off, they are away from their home for 24 hours, but they're allowed to sleep during those 24 hours. You'd also see that some people who work an overnight 12-hour shift, they may be allowed to sleep as well, either as naps on break times, or they might actually be able to sleep during their shift, but they have to just physically be at work in case something happens. So there's so much variation. We're going to really be specifically kind of talking about anybody who works during the night. So whether that is in the evening period of time up to, past normal bedtime essentially, or somebody who may be working overnight. A lot more research is done on night shift work, and night shift work has been shown specifically to really affect our health. So you may have, we're not going to be really talking about people who, let's say they do straight days for a week, they're off for a week, and then they're doing straight days again for a week. That is shift work, but not necessarily what we'd be worried about impacting our sleep. Okay. So why is shift work an issue? So shift work doesn't coincide with our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is 24 hours, and essentially we by nature are programmed to be active during the day, to sleep during the night. So when someone works during the evening or at night, that can be really difficult, right? So night shift workers specifically have increased difficulty with their sleep or with their circadian rhythms. It can lead to sleep deprivation because it's been found that night shift workers on average sleep almost 1.5 to 2 hours less than a daytime worker. As we've learned in previous sessions, accumulation of sleep deprivation can't be paid back, right? We think we can, sleep a little extra on the weekend and our sleep debt's paid back, but that's not really how it works, right? It does accumulate and leads to sleep deprivation. Decreased immune system. So when we work shift work, it actually does increase our stress, which can, as a result, affect our immune system, which can lead to us becoming sick more frequently and staying sick for longer. So studies have actually found that shift workers are more likely to get the cold or flu than daytime workers. It can lead to gastrointestinal issues and or disorders. So that essentially is because we have, we don't digest food properly when at night because we're not programmed to be eating at night. So it can lead to some issues. The acid reflux as well can definitely be an issue. Heartburn, indigestion, appetite disruption because we need to eat at night, but maybe we're not hungry and we don't want to eat at night. May increase risk for cardiovascular issues, cancer, or diabetes. So the exact cause behind all these risks is not completely clear and more research is needed. However, the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified night shift work as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2019. So not a really great thing. That has been based on some limited evidence of cancer in humans, as well as sufficient evidence in cancer on experimental animals. So they're doing more research to kind of see what exactly that link is and whether that's going to change from probably carcinogenic to carcinogenic. Heart rate and blood pressure are also regulated by our circadian rhythm. So when our circadian rhythms are affected, the risk for cardiovascular disease would increase, as well as our lifestyle is really, affects our cardiovascular health. And when we are sleep deprived, we're less likely to eat healthy, as well as to be physically active. Can exacerbate existing health conditions. Of course, if you are working shift work, you definitely want to be talking to your healthcare provider because you may need to change your prescription medication, the time that you take it, or it could affect some health conditions. So just have conversations. Increases risk for workplace injury and or motor vehicle accidents. There is strong evidence that evening and night rotational and irregular shifts do increase the risk of occupational injury. You're going to be more tired And sometimes in the evening shifts, there might be less supervision than in the day shift. And disrupts family and social life, right? You're not available for people when they are awake, because you have to be asleep during all those social and family activities. So it can be really lonely potentially to be a shift worker. And not just that, you know, if you want to play a sport or if you want to join a club, those happen during the day. So that most happen during the day. So that can be difficult to join those and be present with those if you're working shifts. So there is such a thing called shift work disorder, and it is considered a circadian rhythm sleep disorder. So it is actually classified under the International Classification of Sleep Disorders. So it is a real thing, okay? It has been found to be directly related to a person's work schedule. So it is more prominent in those who work night shift. However, those who work early morning shifts, so if you, for example, start at 4 in the morning, you could experience this as well. These are the symptoms that you'd be looking for. So insomnia, disrupted sleep schedule, reduced performance, difficulties with personal relationships, or irritability and depressed mood. Your diagnosis would be by a healthcare provider, so you don't want to just be diagnosing yourself, right? You want to be having a conversation. They would use the use of a sleep journal and potentially sleep studies. At the end of this session, I will give a handout for a sleep diary, so you can, you know, kind of start jotting down how your sleep is going in case you're concerned about this. Treatment may be behavioral and or pharmacological, depending on your situation. Some research has shown that the body really doesn't adapt to shift work, especially those who do a normal sleep schedule on the weekend. So we're going to be talking about strategies on, you know, how to sleep even when you're not working the shift. Okay. So shift work and sleep strategies. So in the chat box, do you want to let me know if there's any specific strategies that you use or have used in the past that have helped you with shift work? And while people are typing, I'm just going to mention, normally we're done a session in a half hour. We might just go a little bit past this just because I want to have a little bit more interaction here if possible. We've got radio silence, so maybe nobody has some strategies. That's okay. If you are typing, feel free to keep typing and I'll check on it. Oh, here we go. We got a couple people. Okay, so somebody has said, when coming off on nights, stay up all day rather than napping and to go back into a normal routine. Okay. Another person saying, use earplugs, completely dark room to sleep during the day. Oh, somebody's saying, basically grin and bear it. Well, hopefully you'll find some information here, some strategies that will work better than that. Somebody's trying to keep a rhythm, a schedule, even during the working later in the day and night. Yeah. So definitely some different strategies. Let's take a look at some that are recommended by you know, the experts on sleep and what they found, what research has found has helped. And some of these, I will say, will be kind of similar to ones that we're going to mention next week on the overall sleep hygiene. But these ones I've made sure to include the information specific to those who work shifts. Oh, and somebody else is saying, okay, so did an activity keep awake after a shift? If you need to transition from day to night or the reverse, white noise. Yeah, awesome ideas. Okay, so first is relaxing before bed. This is important because we want to make sure that we have time between when we get off work and when we go to sleep to signal our bodies to, hey, we need to relax, we need to go to sleep. So including a routine, whatever that might look like to you. So you can use regular and relaxing habits, even such as something simple as putting on pajamas or brushing your teeth, right? You could also read a book. I'd recommend a paper book or light stretching. Avoid stimulating activities, so don't use electronics and don't exercise right before bed if possible. Optimize your bedroom environment. So a couple people have mentioned that as well and some strategies. So first thing, sleep in your bed and don't sleep out other places. I know your couch might look really tempting when you get in the door, but go to your bed. Okay, we want to make sure that your bed signals your body that it's time for sleep versus you every time you look at your couch or sit on your couch, your body's going, yes, this is where I need to sleep, okay? Make sure your bedroom is dark and cool. That temperature factor is going to depend on the unique individual. Normally between 15 to 21 degrees is kind of the range we're looking for, but figure out what works best for you. Inform your family and friends of your sleep schedule. That is incredibly important so that you're not being disturbed. You also may find certain things useful, such as blackout curtains. I know for Alberta, it's Cold Lake, Alberta, it's bright all of the time now, pretty much. So blackout curtains would be a definite. An eye mask, earplugs, fan, or air conditioner. Somebody also mentioned white noise. You can have white noise machine, or there's a lot of apps that do white noise as well. I use also an air purifier in my room just because I kind of like it. I use a humidifier sometimes because it's pretty dry in Alberta as well. So kind of use those tools to your benefit. Some people might find it helpful to find a special bedroom to sleep in if your family's active during the day. So for example, maybe there's a guest room in the basement that's kind of away from all the activity. That would be better for you to sleep in while you have your children and your spouse or whatever kind of doing their own thing on the main floor of the house. Be mindful of substances before bed. So I had mentioned before that alcohol may help you fall asleep, but it's going to decrease your sleep quality. So you're going to feel less refreshed when you wake up. So always avoid alcohol before daytime sleeping. Sleeping pills should only be used in consultation with a healthcare practitioner. Please don't just go randomly grab some. Discuss that, especially if you're using them because of shift work. They can be helpful occasionally, but they are generally found to be less effective long term. So most practitioners actually prescribe them for less than 3 months. Melatonin, I get that question a lot. There are few studies on its effects for night workers, specifically in real situations. Most of the studies are done in labs, which, we don't sleep in a lab day to day, right? Sleep lab studies have found, though, that a melatonin supplement taken 30 minutes before bed can help a person sleep better. However, you don't need a lot. So half a 3 milligram pill is sufficient. Few documented negative side effects, but because there aren't enough scientific studies, it can't be something that's specifically recommended for shift workers at this time. As well, remember the caffeine is a stimulant with long-lasting effects, so it can affect how fast you're going to fall asleep, as well as your overall sleep quality. And unfortunately, for anybody who loves caffeine, the more you age, the more caffeine affects you. So especially if you're over 40 years old, the effects of caffeine are going to be increasing, okay? So avoid caffeine in the last 4 to 5 hours of your shift if you are sleeping right after your shift. And we're going to talk about the sleep schedules that you might choose. Oh, sorry. So figure out your sleep. That's important. So there are a variety of options available to choose when deciding when to sleep between shifts. And we're going to go over a few different ones that, are generally the ones people go with. So the first one is sleep when you come home from work. So for example, let's say you work 2,300 to 700 hours, you're going to sleep from 900 to 1,600 hours. And these are all examples, so just kind of play with the timings based on what your shift is, okay? You would be going to bed as soon as you get home. We want to plan to sleep for at least 7 hours. Remember, we want 7 to 9 hours of sleep. We want to avoid light in the morning, so you can either use sunglasses or orange glasses are specifically designed to block light. I'll actually give you a link to those orange glasses that have been recommended by the Sleep On It Canada campaign as well. Make sure your bedroom is completely dark, so that's where those blackout curtains and those eye masks are going to come in handy for you. And expose yourself to light when you wake up for 1 to 2 hours. So this can either be sunlight or a light therapy lamp, depending on what time you're waking up. Because let's say it's spring, summer right now. If you were to wake up at 1,600 hours, that's not an issue. You're going to have sunlight here. I'm speaking to just about Cold Lake, right? Because I went to bed, at 10 last night, it was still bright. Versus in the winter, you wake up at 1,600 hours. Sunlight's not going to be an option for you here. So then you might be looking at a light therapy lamp. Advantages to this sleep option is that you're likely to have an easier time falling asleep, and you're going to be able to sleep longer, as well as you're going to have opportunity to spend time with family. So you're going to have that opportunity to eat supper, to engage in social activities in the evening prior to going to work. The disadvantages with this are you may be drowsier during the night shift because you've been awake for several hours before you go into work. You're not going to have any downtime between work and sleeping, so you're stopping at 700 hours, you're going to sleep at 900, depending how long it takes you to get home. That could definitely affect that relaxation period. You aren't going to be available for family activities in the morning, and depending on where you live, as I mentioned, you'd experience limited exposure to natural light in the winter. Generally, this option is most recommended by those who are night owls and young adults. So second option is sleep before you go to work. So for example, we're going to take the same shift schedule. If you work 2,300 to 700 hours, you're going to sleep from 1,300 to 2,100 hours. Again, we want to plan to sleep for at least 7 hours. We want to plan to take a nap in the evening before our first shift because we've been awake for quite a while. We want to expose ourselves to natural light in the morning for 1 to 2 hours, and we want to make sure our bedroom is dark. So advantages of this one: you're going to feel more refreshed and awake at work because you haven't been awake for that long before you go to work. You're going to transition to a daytime schedule a lot easier, potentially. You're going to have time after work to relax before you go to bed because you're off at 7. You're not going to go to sleep till 1 o'clock. And you're going to be available for family and social activities both in the morning and at lunchtime. The disadvantage, of course, you would be tired after your first shift because you've been awake for a really long time. Keep that in mind because, of course, occupational injuries. It may be difficult to fall to sleep well in the evening, and you're not going to be available for family and social activities in the evening or for supper. So splitting up sleep. So this is when you sleep in 2 different sections in a day. So for example, if you are yet again working 2,300 to 700 hours, you may choose to sleep from 800 to 1,200 and then 600, sorry, it's not supposed to say 600, 1,600 to 900 hours. You're going to want to plan to sleep at least 7 hours in a day. So your 2 sections would be 3 to 4 hours of continuous sleep per section. We want to avoid light in the morning, but we want to expose ourselves to light in the afternoon for 1 to 2 hours, and we want to make sure our bedroom is dark. So again, the advantages of this would be we're going to potentially increase our total sleep duration during the day. We're going to feel more rested and alert at work. It's going to allow us for an easier transition for fast day to night rotating schedule. So if you're on that type of schedule, and you're going to be available for your family meals, which is great. Disadvantages, of course, yet again, might be hard to sleep in the evening. You may feel that you're spending your entire day in bed because you're sleeping in 2 sections, and you wouldn't be available for family and social activities in the evening. So regardless of which option you take, there are some specific tips as well. There should be 1 to 2 hours where you sleep at the same time every day, whether you work or not. So those are known as anchor sleep hours. So essentially, as an example, if you on your days on, you sleep, let's say, from 900 to 1,600 hours. If you're on days off, you sleep from 2 a.m. to 1,000 hours. So you're always sleeping from 9 to 1,000 hours every day. Okay, so anchor sleep does help stabilize the biological clock and improve sleep quality. However, it may not be suitable for you. So you may have to play around with that to kind of see if that's suitable for you. Okay, so snooze a little. This is napping. So anybody who likes napping, you might be happy with this part. So daytime napping can be helpful for shift workers because it can help you get at least that 7 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. So we do actually want to plan those naps in our schedule, and those should occur at the same time every day. Some of you may be able to nap during your shift. If so, that's fantastic because it could increase your alertness during your night shift. We do want to make sure that we're allowing ourselves a few minutes to wake up properly after sleeping because we would increase our risk of injury if we just go right from being asleep to doing our job. I know we've mentioned before on some sessions, North Bay has sleep pods, right, that they use for napping during certain people's Okay. We had some issues with the Demio server, it seems. So I'm so glad that it went back up, because sometimes we just lose people entirely, and that would be horrible. Yep, I'm going to share those slides again. So I will go over the slide I'm currently on, just in case, because I don't know where it kind of stopped. Okay. All right, perfect. Can everyone see the slides? We're good? Oh, fantastic. Okay, crisis averted. All right. So because I'm not sure where we ended, I'll just go over this one again. That wasn't the last slide? Oh, what was? Okay, good to know. Was this the last slide? Okay, did you hear me describe this slide? Okay, perfect. Great. So you heard me do this one, so let's move on to our next one, which means you didn't hear this one pretty much at all. Okay. So when we're looking at light exposure, we want to expose ourselves to bright light during our shift. So it can increase our alertness at work because it helps stimulate our brain and resets our biological clock. So high intensity light will produce stronger effects. So that would mean from a light therapy lamp. The exposure does depend on your sleep strategy. So if you're choosing to sleep after your night shift, you want to expose yourself to light at the beginning of your shift. If you're sleeping before your night shift, you're exposing yourself at the end of your shift. And if your sleep is divided into two, we want to expose yourself in the middle of the shift. Keep in mind that exposure is not suitable for everyone. You may not have the ability to have a light therapy lamp at work for restrictions at your workplace, or just for economical reasons. But this is a good option if possible. Eat well. So if you work a night shift, it's better to eat at the beginning and end of your shift. If you are hungry, avoid eating heavy meals and instead consume light snacks between 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. if you're working during those times. Pack your own food so that you're avoiding vending machine or canteen temptation. I have been at the canteens. Most are not healthy. So definitely want to avoid those temptations. And I know that the vending machines are definitely not either. Eating your main meal in the evening before going to work as well. We want to try to avoid fatty, sweet, or spicy foods because they can increase our drowsiness or create indigestion as well. If you are a person that sleeps before your night shift, after your night shift in the morning, just eat a really light and nutritious breakfast before you sleep. And do try to eat the same time every day, whether you're working nights, you're working days, or you're on a day off, okay? Examples of those breakfast options could be a whole grain toast with peanut butter or whole grain cereal with 1% milk and berries, okay? So just really easy little options here. Move more. So the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines for adults between the ages of 18 and 64 is we want to achieve at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic physical activity per week, and muscle and bone strengthening activities at least 2 times per week, which we discussed last week. Or Monday. It's Wednesday. Sorry, guys. Dependent on sleep strategy. So if you sleep after your night shift, we want to try to be active in the evening. And if we sleep before our night shift, we want to try to be active in the morning. Regular physical activity does help combat many of the negative effects from night shift work, so that is really important. For those who are going to be active in the morning, try to be active outdoors with natural light because that's your light exposure time. Of course, for some people, like in the winter, that might not be something that people are apt to do, but right now, where it's not winter, so might be a good option for you. Reduce stress. So stress can cause lack of sleep because it makes it more difficult to fall asleep, it increases the amount of times we're going to wake up in the night, and it reduces our perceived sleep quality. Chronic stress also has been found to cause a variety of health issues, not just with sleep. So it's important to find out your stress triggers and think about solutions for those triggers. One big reason why we feel stress is because we don't feel like we're in control, and that definitely could be happening in the military world, right? Because we don't have control over, when we have to work, what we're doing, maybe our posting, maybe how, lack of posting or being posted, being deployed or not being deployed, going on TD or not going on TD, right? So there's a lot of different things where you may not have control in a military environment, but we do want to try to increase our feeling of control in most aspects of our life. And for those things that we don't control, we want to be able to accept that. okay? For shift workers, lack of time is a major source of stress because you feel like all you're doing is working and sleeping, right? So we do want to try to reevaluate our priorities to identify necessary activities. So what is important for you to accomplish in the day other than just working? Try to get help with responsibilities. So for example, just your household chores or childcare so that you can spend time, being physically active, or you can have time for a hobby, which is all going to help reduce that stress component. And the last section I just want to mention is driving after your shift. So anybody who has to commute to work, we want to just keep in mind that after you have worked a night shift, you are at increased risk of a motor vehicle accident, okay? Night shift workers specifically have been awake for a really long time and they're tired from working and their biological clock isn't functioning to let them know that they need to still be awake. Drowsiness has similar impacts to alcohol, so your judgment is overall impaired, but if you look at the impairment from being tired, it's similar to, so if you've been awake for 17 hours, your impairment is similar to if you had a blood alcohol content of 0.05, and if you've been awake for 21 hours, it's similar to a blood alcohol content of 0.08. So that is definitely dangerous to be on the road. It does affect professional drivers as well. They are not immune to these effects, okay? Try walking or using public transportation if available in your area, or if feasible, right? If you commute for an hour, I don't think that you're going to be able to walk, but public transportation may be available depending on where you're from. Vary your route so you can reduce the potential of being on autopilot. I know I've definitely driven on autopilot before because our brain gets very used to going one way. So we want to make sure that we're trying to change it up. Here is actually quite difficult to do that. It's not a very big town, but even just trying one little tiny thing different in your route will help. Carpool if possible. I mean, right now, don't, right? Because it's COVID-19 and you shouldn't be going near people that are not part of your family or your bubble, depending on whichever province you're in. I know some provinces are doing bubbles. So just keep that in mind if you're choosing to carpool. You could also consider moving closer to work. So if you haven't purchased a house, let's say you're renting, and you are renting quite a bit further from work, but you're going to be there for a few years or even a year. So maybe you want to consider moving, renting an apartment closer to work or renting a house closer to work so that you're not having that commute. Warning signs that you are too drowsy to drive include trouble keeping your eyes open, yawning, wandering thoughts, your car is drifting out of the lines, or you're missing exits or turns. If you have any of those warning signs, you need to stop driving and take yourself off the road because you're a danger to yourself as well as to others. Okay. All right. So that is the last part of the information I'm going to present to you on shift work and sleep. The next session is Keep Calm and Sleep On. I'm going to give you that registration link as well in a moment. It is all about sleep hygiene. But first, we're going to ask you a couple poll questions just to see, how you felt that today's information was helpful to you. So the first one is, I feel I can apply what I learned today in my daily living. So you can say strongly, disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, or strongly agree. Okay, so most people have answered. We're still missing some people. Not sure if there was potentially some technical issues on their end, but that's okay. So most people are finding that that was helpful, which is great. And the last poll question here is, how satisfied are you with the Demio platform? So this is the platform that you use for webinars. So are you extremely dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, somewhat satisfied, or extremely satisfied? And after you finish answering that, I'm going to give you some handouts that might be helpful for shift workers. Then I'll put the registration link for the next and last session, and we can open it up to questions as well. Okay, so I'm going to put in some handouts in the chat for you here. So I mentioned before that I said I would share sleep diary. So I've put that in there for you. So you can download that. There's also a sleep and night work questionnaire. So if you are a current night worker, then you can fill out that and kind of see if you potentially might have some issues. And the last one I'm going to post in here is the nutrition tips. So that's nutrition tips specifically for shift workers. I'm also going to put the link here for an interactive web tutorial, which is called Coping with Night Work. And that is done by so it's a partnership by the, don't want to get it wrong here, the Center for Advanced Research and Sleep Medicine, the Université de Montréal, and it is found on the Sleep on It Canada website. So I'm going to put that in there. I believe it's 4 modules. I want to say it's 4 units. Yeah, I've completed it. Definitely really interesting and interactive. And they have tons of other downloads and resources there as well, not just the ones that I provided for you. So if you are kind of interested in that. I also mentioned I would send you the blue block glasses, which they actually link to in that webinar tutorial that I did send to you. So those are those right there. I know I'm giving you a lot of information here, but this is one topic that there is quite a bit of information that I can share with you that could be helpful. And the last link regarding shift work that I'm going to send is just the link for Health Canada, which is the amount of caffeine in certain foods. So remember Monday I talked about how caffeine kind of is not just in coffee. So remember, we want to make sure that we're not consuming caffeine within the last 4 to 5 hours of our shift before we go to bed. So if you are not a coffee drinker, but maybe you're concerned that you might still be consuming it, that'll give you an idea of how much caffeine is in certain foods. Okay, so I'm going to give you that registration link, and if you have questions, now is the time to ask away. So there's the registration link for the last session, which is about sleep hygiene. Here are the sleep resources that we've gone over, which was from today, and then of course the resources that we give for every day. Okay, so first is, are you able to DM or post links for previous webinars? Yep, I'll just actually go and grab our CAF connection. So the Cold Lake Health Promotion CAF connection, we have a link to it. So I will grab that. If people are asking questions in the chat, I'll reply in just a moment. I'm just going on a different tab right now. There we go. All right. Here are the previous webinars. So for the series, you're going to see you would see all the links for all of the sessions that have been done nationally, not just this series, but you'll be able to access the series here as well at that link. It takes about a week or so so like this week, we won't be posting those links until at least next week. Okay, so somebody else, what would you recommend for people that are on rotating shifts? So Tana, I'm just going to ask you kind of if you could give an idea, like a bit more clarification of what you're specifically asking, because the tips I went over would be helpful for anybody working shifts, even if you're on rotating day-night shifts. We want to try to keep our sleep schedule, as similar as possible. If you are a day and night shift worker that rotates, then you want to try to make sure that you have that anchor hour at least, and we're eating, at the same time or around the same time. Your naps are going to be planned for around the same time, and you want to make sure that you're increasing your physical activity or being physically active. Okay, so every 2 weeks I would switch between day and then night, and then you would have, I'm assuming you have the weekend between. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So you would want to definitely keep in mind the tips and stuff that I mentioned, but you want to make sure that you don't have, too great of a difference in your sleep schedule right away. And it can be difficult. Like some shift schedules are hard to switch from. If anybody has any, strategies that they use to switch from their night to day shifts, feel free to share as well. Because what I've mentioned may not work best for you. You may need something a little different. Yeah, so a lot of people are asking about shift recommendations for rotating shift types. Let me just give 1 second. I'm just going to actually grab something because I believe that I had a link, which was from Canada's Occupational Health and Safety about rotational shifts, which you can then read a bunch up on. So give me 1 moment and I'll grab that for you. Okay, here we go. All right, so the link I'm going to share with you is actually a rotational shift work fact sheet from the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. It explains, what rotational shift work is and the effects and everything, as well as it explains some, some organizational approaches, as well as strategies that you can use. So if you are a rotational shift worker, it'll give you guidelines for diet and eating patterns, sleep, and other important considerations. So this would be definitely beneficial for you. If you're a shift worker that isn't on rotationals, you can still take a look at this. It might still be beneficial for you to kind of have that as a takeaway. Okay, that is the link there for that. Oh, okay, so somebody's also mentioning that, yeah, the shift moved by 4 hours every day. Some people here as well, like some people work very set shifts, some people they don't know what their shift is going to be. They're supposed to be on nights and they end up on days. So I can definitely appreciate how difficult it can be sometimes to kind of make sure that you're doing the best you can with your sleep, based on the requirements of your job and your shifts, because it can be quite difficult, and I completely understand that. I think that's about it there. Okay, so anybody have any other questions that you have for me? If you think of anything, which is what I always put this in here, that is our Gmail account, which is our temporary health promotion account for 4Wing, just while we're working from home. So you can send us a message there, as well as you can find us on Instagram at that. That's our account name on Instagram. We have a full sleep campaign going on that you can read all about, and then you can easily just DM us on that too. Okay, if nobody has any other questions, I do want to thank you for coming in today. I'm sorry it lasted a little longer than normal. Had some technical issues for sure. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and join on Monday for our last session, which will be on June 1st at the same time. So we will see you next week. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend, and hopefully the weather is wonderful where you are.